Welcome back. You are watching live coverage of the Fulcrum Conference. We are going to dive deeper in one-on-one conversations now on the future of work. And joining me right now is Sarita Gupta. She is the Director of the Future of Workers at the Ford Foundation. Great job on your panel discussion this morning. How'd
Thank
everything go?
you. It was great. What a fantastic conversation. What a fantastic convening.
It's funny. Your part of the conversation was what's happening and what do we need to solve for, which are two huge questions that I'm sure you could take hours talking about. But from your perspective and vantage point at the Ford Foundation, tell us some of the things that you're working on an everyday basis.
Well, these conversations about the future of work are really, really important. And the work that the foundation is doing is really to center the experience and the voices of workers in these conversations. We think it's critically important to make sure that the lived experiences of workers are part of not only defining what the problem is that we're solving for, but also helping to define the solutions moving forward. So much of our work is centered on how we do that, how we bring workers to tables, to multi-stakeholder spaces like Fulcrum and other spaces to really share their experiences. I think the second part of our work is really thinking about what are the new sort of policy and legal frameworks and organizing and frankly cultural frameworks that we need that really help us imagine a future that is as helping us really achieve economic equality. The Ford Foundation is very committed to finding solutions to inequality, and so really centering our work on how we ensure that things that I talked about this morning, like wage stagnation, how do we address that? How do we address the immense concentration of wealth right now? How do we ensure that the work that people do to help generate wealth in this country, they're also benefiting from that?
Right, because you have a lot of corporations who are making decisions right now, and that they're trying to be deliberate in some of the processes that they're doing, whether that's helping infuse nonprofits to do work training programs.
Right.
But where do you see the largest disconnect between worker communication with the companies that they work for?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that workers, that the really the loss of bargaining power and the power for workers in workplaces to actually have a voice and shaping policies, wages, benefits, conditions, et cetera. We are in a moment in history where we have the lowest, one of the lowest percentages of workers that are actually in unions. So the actual bargaining power is a huge challenge that we need to address, because the truth is, to your point earlier, these conversations, there's an inevitability to these conversations, like robots are taking over, automation is taking over all
And it
these
causes a lot of
jobs.
fear and sometimes misunderstanding among the workforce.
Exactly,
Too.
it stokes so much fear. But the reality is, these are all choices. These are choices policymakers will make, these are choices businesses will make, and choices that workers will make. And so, how do we center the conversations around choices and recognize the importance of all of the voices, including worker voices? So much of our work has also been looking at how can we support the ability for workers to actually have a voice in their workplaces, in their communities, and the economy as a whole. And the Ford Foundation, certainly here in Detroit, has really, this has mattered a lot. Detroit is a very important city to us, given our own history,
Mhm.
but also given the immense work happening around the revitalization of the city and ensuring that all residents have a voice in shaping what that revitalization looks like. So a lot of the foundation's work has been about ensuring that the voices of all residents are part of shaping the future and that we're creating accountable institutions. That kind of civic engagement is really critical right now.
Okay, so you say so that we're creating accountable institutions. So are you finding that companies, nonprofits, government entities are starting to listen to the workers more, or what more do we still need to improve upon?
Yeah, I think it depends. Nothing's monolithic,
Mhm.
right? I do think that we're starting to see openings. I mean, Fulcrum is a great example of this, where you have leaders from businesses in the room with policymakers, with people who represent nonprofits and labor organizations and other authors and academics really having these conversations about solutions, like being solution oriented right now matters. And in that process, listening to the experiences of workers. The fact that this conference is decided to have a broader frame than just the narrow how do we contend with automation in itself,
Right.
but choosing to have a broader economic frame and talk about what all do we need to solve for, and where and how can workers alongside many of the other stakeholders really have a voice. um, I do think it's not inevitable. So my point here is that we are seeing across the country workers trying to exercise their right to have a voice in shaping the economy and our democracy moving forward, whether it's strikes here at GM that
Right.
happened or the teachers around the country. But the point here is to listen to what that is telling us, which is workers are hungry to have a real voice, and we should do what we can to create the right mechanisms and pathways for that to happen.
How do we tell employees how to advocate for themselves or set them up for where their company might be going, and trying to articulate that they would like to have a part in that and they would like to have a voice, but walking that fine line, and no one wants to rock the boat all the time for
Yeah.
fear of repercussions, honestly.
Absolutely, absolutely. There, people are very frightened of retaliation. So one is, I think we have to help workers and employees know that collectively they're stronger. So how they can come together with their with others in their workplace to have a real conversation about the problems and the opportunities, and to meet with management. That's not an easy process. We've been living in an era, and it's to say that here in Detroit, but we've living in an era where that kind of participation for workers has been thwarted. You know, like the decline in unions is real in this country, and the real attacks on the idea of worker voice. So the ability for workers to take a stand together, to see that there's an opportunity for them to shape the future, because our history has shown that that is possible,
Mhm.
right? I mean, jobs in the auto sector weren't always good middle class jobs,
No.
right? They were at one time low wage work. And thanks to workers coming together and really pushing for changes, that really changed, and we created economic mobility. We are at a time when we can create economic mobility again. The future of work, automation, all that the changes in the economy that we're seeing just gives us a new opportunity to create new labor markets.
Well, that also can install some fear in people, saying, well, if we're talking about automation, automatically people do think about workers on a line, saying,
Yeah.
is that all going to become technologically taken care of, and with machines who are going to be able to do that work, or that monotonous, if you've got something like a job in monotony, that they're going to be able to have AI take care of that? How do we get information out to people in the workforce to kind of look at where they are and look at the jobs that they're doing and prepare themselves for the changes that are ahead, which everyone here at this conference says are inevitable, that are coming?
Right. Absolutely. These changes are coming. Well, so for one thing, I think it's important for workers to understand that automation is not new. Automation has existed throughout history in the United States. Everything from the Great Migration from farms to the Industrial Revolution. I mean, those were huge shifts in our economy, and automation played a big role in all of that. So it is not new for there to be automation. What is important is understanding where employees and communities have a voice in shaping how automation is being used. In other words, on our panel, we talked a little bit about how technology can enable bad practices,
Mhm.
or it can enable good ones. So, how do we ensure that the wealth that's being created through automation, for example, is being invested in ways that help to ensure economic mobility in this country versus the level of inequality that we see? Those are what I mean by choices that are happening, and workers have a lot at stake in those conversations, both in their workplaces and in our democracy as a whole. And so, what I would say to workers is automation is not new.
Mhm.
The pace at which and the degree to which it's happening is certainly new, but that doesn't mean we don't have rights and a voice. Workers don't have rights and a voice in this conversation. And to really find the partnerships with multiple stakeholders who can ensure that they, alongside the private sector, the public sector, academics, others, can really think about what would both enhance and make jobs better quality jobs thanks to technology. That's possible. What could that look like? Or when and how and if automation is introduced into workplaces. Often workers have the best perspective on that.
Well, it's not going to be one entity that takes the lead. It's going to have to be a comprehensive
It's
effort.
going to have to be a comprehensive effort. Absolutely.
Well, Sarita, thanks so much for joining us. It was good to meet you.
Thank you so much.